Not a YouTuber, just like making videos. And in this video here, I'm going to go into the truth behind the fall of the black community. I'm going to go into the truth behind the decimation of the black community, which there are certain things that contributed to the state of the black community as it is today that nobody's talking about. And in this video here, I'm going to present forth irrefutable information. Now, for years I've been watching YouTube, social media, and these guys kick around theories of exactly what they think happened. Why the abysmal performance of the so-called black community. And and they mention, and it usually boils down to two things they mention: integration and feminism. That they felt that the black community was doing so good, we integrated with white people, and that's when we sort of fell off. And I've said this before, that integration without I would say segregation without independence is virtually useless. What good is us being segregated from white people when we had to go by their same laws? It's like during prohibition. When white people, when it was illegal to have alcohol, it wasn't like black people were segregated and said, "Oh yeah, we can drink alcohol, but you white people can't." No, I'm like, we were still dragged in their court systems. When America went to war, blacks were drafted. Drafted into the armed forces. And as far as feminism go, and the most popular theory, one theory that is just, when you really look at it under a microscope, it disintegrates. Is this theory that black women kicked the black men out and wanted to raise kids on their own, and that's caused the collapse. To me, that's more of an effect. We have to go into the concept of cause and effect. Single parent households is more so of an effect of what happened. And to me, besides white supremacy and black people living in a country that pretty much doesn't want us here unless to exploit us, there are two major cataclysms that happened that was probably caused the black community to finally snap. We're in the state that we're in today. Two things, and nobody's really talking about it. People just, just conveniently leave them out their narrative. One is the closing of plant jobs, of industrial America. These plants that were eventually outsourced overseas, major factories and so forth. Two, the introduction of crack cocaine. That was like the 1-2 knockout blow for black people. Besides other stuff, post-slavery syndrome or whatever, those two things created devastation. The type of devastation we still haven't, recovered from. And that's why they say that the Reagan era, the Reagan administration, that's one of the worst eras for black people. That's when, in my opinion, is where the working class black neighborhoods were just distraught. Now you think about it. Think about back in the days. The 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. So that was a time where a black man, or or anybody who's considered an unskilled worker or less educated, can get him a job working at one of these plants or whatever, and support a family. I'm like, think about places like Detroit, Flint, Michigan. Chicago and so forth. When black people migrated to Detroit, they didn't go there, and from Mississippi or the South. Well, they didn't go there and say, "Hey, we're gonna go to Detroit and we're gonna we're gonna hustle some drugs, or we're gonna shoot the place up or whatever." No, they went to these cities because they knew the jobs were there, and for a better way of life. They was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go over to Detroit, get me one of these jobs in the automobile industry and so forth. I'm gonna buy me a house, raise my family up and so forth, and so forth." So it's hard to believe that some of these decrepit areas that people try to avoid, like the south side of Chicago, Detroit, Flint, Michigan, Gary, Indiana, was prosperous places. They were places that you can raise a family and so forth. You had this strong, hardworking black middle class and so forth. And through the outsourcing and downsizing, it all dissipated. Think about even white people was hit by this. Matter of fact, this is what Michael Moore talks about. Michael Moore, his first documentary was called Roger and Me, where he talks about Flint, Michigan. You had the GM plant there. And when the GM plant moved to Mexico or South America somewhere, it devastated the community, both white people and black people. Michael Moore did another documentary called Capitalism, a Love Story, where he talks about how back in the days a man can, back in the days there was larger families. A man can have like 7 or 8 kids and work at one of these factory jobs and so forth, and not only be able to support his family, pay his bills, and have like vacations. Them days are over with now. Now you have to, to make it, you have to have a college education. And you still may be barely getting by on that. And a college education still won't be able to afford you at like a big family and so forth. Matter of fact, a lot of people with college degrees opt to not have any kids or have, small families, 2 kids, and that's that. Also back in the days, people got paid more, and to coincide with what rent was. Rent was cheaper there, and stuff like a loaf of bread and candy and your energy bill, things were cheaper, and so forth. Compared to what you got paid, and so forth. Like a factory job back then may pay $15 an hour, and that's for low level, low skill type of work. Now, of course, adjust that to inflation, it'll be about $30 to $35 today. So a dude's making $35 an hour, and bear in mind, his rent is still not as high as rent is now. Stuff like bread and food and your electric bill wasn't as high, so things dramatically changed, especially during the 80s. That's when the rich got richer and the poor really got poor. That's when you had this business class come up, these young executives and fast sport cars doing cocaine and things of that nature, and they're making deals with the Japanese. This is a time when America kind of really, sold out to the highest bidder. And then facing this devastation, because the thing is, the black community was never self-reliant. The big part of income or to the black community is black people working for white people, and so forth. And then you had the introduction of crack cocaine, and that was a monster. Crack cocaine in the black community was like the black plague in Europe. It came. It was like a natural disaster. You have to understand, when crack cocaine was first being introduced to black people, they didn't know that it would turn them into zombies. They didn't know that it would turn them into baseheads. They thought it would be just some recreational drug. So I'm going to just do a little bit of crack here, drink my drink and, go to sleep, wake up and go to work the next day. No. No, for a lot of people, crack cocaine, pretty much took over their life. You know, and then you had the war against drugs. You know, I'm like, drugs have existed in this country, you know, from since the 1800s. But with this drug, you know what I'm saying, you have this war now. And you know, it was literally just throwing the net in the black community and just dragging everybody up out of there. You know, even if you was around drugs, you know, you can get caught up. You know, it's kind of like a fisherman's net. You know, they want to get tuna, but they get all kind of other stuff too. You know, and the drug crack cocaine was easy to make. So then when you think about the harsh economic conditions in the black community now, you know, with all the factory work and things dramatically changing and black people are unable to cope, a lot of blacks sold drugs. You know what I'm saying? It was easy to make profit off crack cocaine. You know, and they needed something to supplement their income. And then the drug wars happened. You know, you had these drug dealers saying, well, we're not going to let just anybody sell drugs anymore. You know what I mean? We're going to monopolize on things. And then the war against crack cocaine. And why do you think for the longest, you know, because Obama recently passed that disparity law, but for the longest, if you got caught with crack cocaine, you get a longer sentence than regular cocaine, which didn't make any sense since cocaine, you know what I'm saying, by itself has been wreaking havoc on America for, you know what I'm saying, decades before the concept of crack cocaine. And so therefore, see, back in the days, and that's when like the black community, even the working class black community, just turned into the hood. See, back in the days, you had, you know what I'm saying, the working class black community, and you had the ghetto. Think about the movie Dead Presidents. If you look at our main character, who was played by Lorenzo Tate, he lived in a working class black environment, but he liked to hang out in the ghetto. He liked to hang out in you know what I'm saying, that pool hall with Kirby. And think about when he went to Vietnam, his baby mother, you know, when she was fine as hell, moved into the projects. And you remember he went to their house, and you know, she had roaches, and she was getting money from a sugar daddy and a pimp. The movie did a good job at differentiating the difference between the ghetto and the working class black neighborhoods. Now, you know, with Reaganomics or whatever, they kind of, you know what I'm saying, it's kind of like a blurry line now. Now it's like everywhere black people are, it's the hood. And then you figure, you know what I'm saying, with this degenerate black culture that has emerged, hip-hop, rap music, glorifying ill behavior, glorifying selling drugs and so forth. See, I know what I'm talking about because I've seen it with my own eyes. Now I'm going to go into my own experience. I remember as a kid in the 80s, you know, and I was probably in kindergarten in the first grade, going over to my grandmother's neighborhood. My grandparents lived in a decent area. It was a decent area. There was predominantly black people. There was some white people. And, you know, it was a nice area. You know, it wasn't no gunshots at night, well manicured lawns. There was a lot of black mom and pop stores, you know, and so forth. Now, this area is just decrepit. You know, this area is an eyesore. It deteriorated over time. And it wasn't because of black women kicking the black man out and wanting to raise children on their own. You know, this area was devastated by things such as crack cocaine and these factory jobs going overseas are closing down or whatnot. You know, these economic shifts. That's what happened there. I've seen it. You know, even though I was an army brat moving around, but when I used to visit my grandmother, You know, my grandparents, I've seen it. I've seen the neighborhood they live in getting worse. Now, eventually, my grandparents moved out into, you know, greener pastures in a better neighborhood. So I've literally see things. Even my hometown of Indianapolis. You know, I know back in the days when I was a kid, I lived here before my dad went into the military and I became an army brat. You know, most of the black neighborhoods were good. You didn't hear about gunshots and so forth. You know, it was Reaganomics. You know, and that's what and that's the ultimate killing point. Now, there's other things to factor in, but to sit up there and blame it on black women, like, you know, like black women had control, like it was black women that closed down these factories, black women that brought crack cocaine in our neighborhoods. You know, it's ridiculous. These single parent households is just an effect. And then when we sit back and we analyze things, you know what I'm saying, single parent households are not as rampant as people may think. Yeah, black children born out of wedlock is at a high capacity, but that don't mean that they grow up in a household with just a single mother. The father can still be, you know, in the house. You know, and I think that, you know, there was just a breaking point. You know, black men went crazy, and you know, he got addicted to drugs and alcoholism. So if you got the head of the house who used to work at a plant job, you know what I'm saying, making $15 an hour, just to today's time $35 an hour, he loses his job and he get addicted on crack cocaine, whatever. You know, I'm like that's the wrap. That's the end. And those are the two. To me, those are the two main benefactors that led to. I don't want to say the two, but the two things that led to the breaking point, among other things. But that's all I want to say. Thanks for watching, and never stop learning.